Hello and welcome to I Will Be Your Voice, a McKinney-Vento moment. My name is Elizabeth Fortner and I am the Marketing and Outreach Specialist in Region 3. And here with me today, I have my partner in crime, Miss Amanda Claire.
Hi, everybody.
Thank you for being with us, Amanda. And today I want to introduce to you all Diane Nilan. She is the president and founder of Hear Us Incorporated. She is also the editor and photographer of the Charlie books, which we will get into shortly. We are also going to hear by Miss Diane her experience in the implementation of the McKinney-Vento Act, as we all know today. So please join us in welcoming Miss Diane Nilan.
Well, thank you very much, Elizabeth and Amanda. It's good to join with you and your audience and have some time to talk about things that we love and things that we're trying to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having us.
Yes, and we're so impressed
and for being with us.
Yeah, we're having you this time. We're really impressed with all of the things that you've accomplished. And we started talking briefly and we just decided, we need to make sure that everybody hears the story. So we wanted to make sure we pulled everybody in before we got to the juicy bits. So let's rewind a little bit and talk a little bit about your history with McKinney-Vento and how it all got started. Can you tell us a little bit about what the processes look like and where you started and how you were integral to that process?
Sure. I'm always happy to share that story because it's got some potent memories. So I lived in Illinois at the time and had been running a shelter there. And at the shelter, and this was back, the shelter that I was running in 1993, we had a family that had just become homeless, a mom and 3 kids, and they had just moved into our transitional shelter. And the mom came to me and was telling me that the school district that the kids had been going to previously wouldn't let them return because they were homeless and they were now living in a different district, which was adjacent to them. So, but she really wanted her kids to stay in the school district. That's where they were secure and they really enjoyed it. They were successful, good students, and they really wanted to return. So I said, well, there's, the McKinney Act. That's what it was called at the time in old days. And I said, let's look at that. And we looked at it and it looked like she should be able to have her kids stay there. So I contacted the school district and they said no. And so we kind of pushed it a little harder because at the time I was the president of the Illinois Coalition to End Homelessness. So I had a lot of power behind me. Not really, but that's all right. It was a good title. And so anyhow, we pushed, and then the school district sued the mother to keep her out. And it was like, are you kidding me? So then we got a lawyer to countersue. And it went to court, as all good things do. Yeah. And and this was going to court at the time that it was like the busiest time in my life because our seasonal shelter was opening. And I'm like, all right, I will try not to go totally crazy here. But we went to court, and the mom was an absolute total advocate for her kids. And she didn't want her kids in the media at all. But we had started stirring up things in the media. And so we go to court with the mom, and her name is, and she's been public about this, so I'm not revealing anything private, Thais Boatwright. And she is actually, I'd say, the mother of the McKinney-Vento Act as we know it today. So Thais very gallantly went at it in court with the school district and their, $500 an hour lawyer. And after, a few weeks of court, we ended up we lost. But the couple interesting things behind that is at the time, our congressman in that district was Congressman Denny Hastert, who was a Speaker of the House. And he was somebody I knew. And so he had been following this particular case. He ended up having one of his staff persons get the mom relocated in the district. So the kids actually were able to stay in the district during the dispute, which is now part of the law too. So the kids, were kind of there, and then they were officially there, because then they became, back in that district. So the problem was solved there, the immediate problem. But then the little group of us stood around going, well, that's really sucks, because the kids really wanted to stay in their school. And a few of us are, former teachers, and we know school and education stability and all that. So we're like, well, we can't change the federal law, but let's see if we can get a state law passed. It would be the first one in the nation to protect the rights of kids that experiencing homelessness and give them educational stability. So I sent a letter out to all our members across the state, and I said, we're going to try to do this. What would you like in this bill? And so they said, well, we ended up with a list of 13 really good things that would be, like our wish list. And then we showed the list to our newly elected state representative, Tom Cross, who was a Republican. And he looked at it and he's like, okay, I'll go with this. I'll run with this. I'll get bipartisan support, and we'll take this to the, state capitol and go from there. So there we are. Now, on that list were the things that, if you looked at that list today, you would see the things that end up being McKinney-Vento today. We didn't know that. And so we ended up going to Springfield, going down there, lobbying. It was just a crazy session back then. And, but we were able to get that bill passed in the first go at it, which was just amazing. I just kept saying, well, they didn't read the bill, because it said, all kinds of things now that we see that are so important. So we got the bill passed in 1994, and the governor signed it, and we're like, wow, that's cool. But then I found out that the bill was the law that we had then, which we actually called Charlie's bill, because if you look at the picture on the cover of the Charlie book, that's Charlie, who was the poster child of our campaign. And actually the legislators, as we were lobbying, it was kind of funny. It's like, oh, you're here for that law about the boy, what's his name? Charlie. Yeah, it was like Charlie's Act. So even today, when I talk to some of those legislators, they're like, they still talk about Charlie's bill and Charlie's Act. So anyhow, we got the bill passed, and then I got a civics lesson, because the bill is no good and if nobody knows about it and nobody follows it. So I worked with the State Board of Education, because I was the president of the Homeless Coalition, as I mentioned. And so I ended up being like the henchwoman for the State Board of Education. They really couldn't come out and, be mean and nasty, but I could. And just as an example, so there was a school district in the rural western part of Illinois, and I got a call from the McKinney-Vento, he wasn't McKinney-Vento then, but the Illinois State Board of Ed homeless education coordinator or whatever he was. But anyhow, he calls me and he's like, Diane, there's this district over there in Western Illinois. And he explains, the family was, as legitimately homeless as anybody could be. They're certifiably homeless. And the guy wasn't going to let them in the district. So he says, could you call them? And I'm like, I went crazy running the shelter just because it was just so busy. It's like 175 people. We had 5,000 volunteers, and, it was just a very few staff person. So I'm like, oh, sure, Gary, I'll give them a call right now. So I called the superintendent. But before I did that, I had a friend that was working at the Chicago Tribune, and I explained it to her. And I said, so is it okay if I use you and mention that, I was going to talk to you about this if this guy doesn't fold? And she's like, sure, I'll get right on that. So anyhow, I called the guy, and, he went, oh, well, they're not really from our district, blah, blah, blah. And he went this whole thing, and, we would educate them if we should, but we don't have to because blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, oh man, this is going bad. So I'm like, okay, let me just call this to a halt, and let me just say that my next phone call is going to be to the Chicago Tribune, and then you're going to hear from them. And he's like, oh, well, wait a minute. Whoa, wait. So he ended up rescinding his stupid decision. And so it kind of went like that for a few years in Illinois. And we're like, gosh, we got to get word out. And so basically the State Board of Ed did work hard to get the word out. And back in 2003, I left the shelter and then ended up running a program in the 8 collar counties around Chicago. There were 305 school districts, and I was in charge of implementing the newly passed McKinney-Vento Act, which had included an absolute whole list of the Illinois statute in it. So it's like, that's the law that we've had since 1994. And so then it passed in 2002. It was implemented in 2003. And I was basically the sheriff for those 8 counties for the State Board of Education to get this law, in place and get it to happen. So 2 years, we had a small staff. We covered it. We were relentless. We did a lot of outreach for families. We did a lot of troubleshooting when families were kept out of school. The kids were kept out of school. And we were 100% successful because, it's a slam dunk when the family's homeless and you know where they should be going. And, so we got them in. So then the project that I was working we were just getting ready to do a film of my friend Barbara Duffield from DC, who's been my right-hand partner in all of this. She and I got a grant to do a film of kids talking about what it was like to be homeless and what school meant to them. So just as we got that grant and hired the film crew and we were ready to start, and this is at the end of March, early April, I got told that my project was going to be restructured by the regional schools office that was hosting us that knew nothing about what we were doing. I'm like, you're restructuring something you don't know anything to. Alrighty, I know what that means. So I knew I was going to be out of a job. I knew that the film project was going to get scrubbed. And that really, really bothered me because I thought, the kids talking about what school meant and what homelessness was like, that would have been a very cool film, very effective. So I ended up stewing about that for a few days. I knew at the end of June I was going to be needing a new job anyhow. So I ended up thinking, well, I'm just going to start my own nonprofit, and I named it Hear Us, and I'm going to make the film. I'd never made a film before, but I've done photography. So it's like, how hard can that be? And so I ended up starting Hear Us. All right. So anyhow, I decided I was going to live in a camper van. So I ended up selling my little townhouse that I loved, actually, and getting a pro model video camera that I didn't know how to work and doing some fundraising. And so in November of 2005, I hit the road, and I've been living in a van ever since. And I've traveled around the country filming interviews of kids that are homeless and making documentaries. I've done some state projects and some local projects, and I've done some in Pennsylvania. And it's been something that I've really loved doing. And, I get some great stories from the families. So
that's amazing. Diane, where do you keep those videos?
On the Hear Us website. Anybody can watch them. They're all free, and there's a whole list of them, and they're just really all very, very great, powerful tools and inspirational. The stories are just incredible, and it's the kind of thing that people really will get the idea of what it's like that families go through. So that's been the work of Hear Us, the underlying work of Hear Us. Now to the story of the Charlie book. So back in about 2015, I had Diana Bauman came to me. Now, Diana was running the National Education for Homeless Children, ECH, National, I'm going to mess up their name, but they were providing the technical assistance on the McKinney-Vento Act. Yeah. Not NACI. Okay. No, this was the National Center for Homeless Education, NCHE.
Oh, NCHE.
Yeah. So Diana was retiring, although she didn't really retire, but I didn't know that at the time. So she came up to me at a conference and she said, I'm going to be retiring, and I would like to do something to help you and to help kids experiencing homelessness. So she said, what do you think about me doing a book of, things that people can do to help homeless kids? And I'm like, sure. She says, I'll let you be the publisher and the producer of it. You'll get the proceeds. I'll do all the work of, pulling things together. So she pulled together 60 ways to help homeless kids. I did the photography and the editing of the book, and it's been out since then, 2016, I think it came out. And it's been a great tool for people who just, there's no end of people who say, I'd like to help. What can I do? And this is the kind of 24-page book that you can hand to somebody and say, take a look at this, pick something in here and go with it. And it gets people involved and it gets them a little bit informed, and it goes from there.
Diane, if you don't mind, what led you to develop such a passion that you have for helping families who are experiencing homelessness and getting into this line of work?
Insanity. No. Well, it actually, my involvement, I had been a teacher, and then I had done some other things, retail and other things, because I was just, in my 20s and 30s trying to do something worthwhile with my life. And then I ended up losing my job that I was doing that I really liked. But that was, you can read about that in my book. I wrote a book, Crossing the Line, Taking Steps to End Homelessness. The information you can find on my website. But anyhow, so I was unemployed at the beginning of the 1980s. Now, I think probably I'd be right in guessing neither one of you were even alive at that time, but that's good. You didn't miss much. There was a time of terrible inflation. Housing market had tanked. Unemployment was just skyrocketing, and here I am unemployed. I'm like, oh crap. So I had a friend came up to me and she said, I know you're needing a job and wanting a job. And she said, there's a job at Catholic Charities in Joliet it's a 6-month job. And I'm like, 6 months is good. That's 6 months as a paycheck. It's like, that's good. So it was just doing the agency self-study for accreditation. I'm like, oh, I don't know anything about that, but I'm sure I can do that. And so I ended up starting to work at this. It was a small agency, very, hardworking people. And so I got there, and homelessness was just starting to skyrocket at the time. And so my boss said to me at one point, he's like, you're the only person that's got like not a whole lot of stuff on your plate. I mean, I was doing my job, but he says, so I want you to take care of homelessness. I'm like, what do I know about homelessness? I'm not a social worker. I'm a philosophy major. So I ended up going, all right, I'll do that, because that means I'm going to have more than a 6-month job. And so I ended up finding out about some shelter models in the area, and that were kind of overnight shelters that relied on people from faith communities to staff every night. And so I ended up finding about that and starting a shelter in Joliet back in the mid to late 80s. That got me into it. So it was a stumble into thing, not I'm going to follow my passion at the time, but it became a passion because I just realized that there was a lot of injustice. And, the families and the adults that I was working with, I mean, it's like they just didn't have a chance because of the way things were. So I ended up, kind of looking at it like they're the underdogs, and I'm going to fight for the underdogs. And, then just started learning more about housing and justice and all the things that are so important that are not happening, and poverty and all that. So it's like that got me started, and it's kept me busy ever since.
I'm sure. That is amazing, Diane. Now, I know you mentioned the mother of McKinney Act. Do you still have any contact with her till this day?
I haven't recently, but a few years ago I did. And her kids are all doing amazing. There are 3 kids, and I don't want to misstate what they were doing, but one was in the medical field, at least one, maybe 2, and one was a chef. So they were doing well. She was struggling with a lot of health issues, as a lot of the parents do, because of their experience with trauma earlier and all. But she was, really proud to have such an important role in literally helping millions of kids experiencing homelessness have the stability of education. So she was, it was a brutal battle. I mean, the court battle for her was terrible because they ripped on her. They're like, you divorced and you did this and and it's like, whoa, wait, what does this mom want? She wants her kids to go to school and succeed.
Yeah, that's sad. And it's shocking that we still deal with this till today.
Oh.
I mean, there's still so many kids out there and families who are experiencing homelessness. Thankfully, though, I mean, I feel like the awareness of the McKinney-Vento is way better than it was, I'm sure, in the 90s.
Yeah, it is way better. It is way better. But I'll tell you what, and I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday who had surveyed all of the Illinois school districts with McKinney-Vento in mind. And there's some statistics that the school districts have to, submit to the state. And they have to say how many kids are on free and reduced lunch and how many kids are in the district and how many kids they've identified as homeless, because every school district has to have a homeless liaison, and that person's supposed to do all this identifying and reporting and serving. But hey, so there are 80% of the school districts in Illinois, the home of McKinney-Vento Act, if you really want to look at it that way, 80% of the districts are under-reporting, including hundreds of those districts reporting no homeless kids. And you just go, oh, no homeless kids, huh? Really? So it's one of those things where, as much as we'd like to think that there's a growing awareness of McKinney-Vento, and I think there is, but there's a huge need for the state boards of education to really take this more seriously, to enforce McKinney-Vento, and to make sure that the districts are complying with it. And that's not happening in Illinois. And I don't want to say anything about Pennsylvania, but I'm guessing that.
I mean, thankfully, we have the regional approach in PA,
right,
which is, I think it's something that should be nationwide, if you ask me, because, now you have a central office in 8 regions who are there to support the staff in their liaison position and to train them and to come educate them and educate students and spread that awareness. So I feel like other states should actually adopt that regional approach.
And I will say that Illinois did copy Pennsylvania's regional approach back in 2003, because that's where I was doing my 8 counties. And so the thing is, McKinney-Vento is not well funded at all. And that funding really makes some districts go, it's not that serious of a problem because there's no serious, which is good. And you have to have good regional leaderships as far as the, like you have there in that particular region. I happen to know that region pretty well, and you have a pretty awesome team there. So it's one of those things where that makes all the difference in the world. It's an uphill climb still. And the high level of homelessness, especially after the pandemic, well, it's not really over, but it's the kind of thing where we just know that's made things a lot worse for a lot more families and youth on their own. And it's just, it's really an important issue that really needs to get more attention.
I was thinking when you were saying about the housing crisis and how unemployment rates were high, and
we probably
don't remember that. And I'm thinking, right this second, I think we're experiencing that. We're sort of going through a similar situation and a similar circumstance right now in the world we currently live in. So I think you're absolutely right to say that there is any school district in the country that has 0 homeless students, unless that is a private school or something, is highly improbable.
Yeah. I'd bet my lunch money you're right.
Well, I think that your story is amazing, and I think that we're very, very fortunate to have people like you who are willing to be the pit bull and to kind of come out and make the fight that you got to have those people who are willing to bare a little teeth and try to, put up the hard work it requires to get something like that passed. And we're really thankful that you did.
No, thanks.
I think that Diane shared so much with us about her process and where she came from. And I just am impressed with that. I think I'm a little bit speechless, to be
And
honest.
Diane, I feel like you should be called the mother of McKinney Act.
Well, it was certainly more than me doing it.
Absolutely.
Not a big team. We certainly weren't anything like, with a Wall Street law firm or anything helping us out. It was a very much grassroots effort. There were some really cool efforts. We did a couple of events in DC before the McKinney-Vento Act was reauthorized. So in 2000 and 2001, we had kids from across the country come and talk about what homelessness was and what school meant to them to a panel of legislators. And that particular campaign for 2 years, we called it Forget Me Not, Help Homeless Kids Blossom. And it was really a tremendous effort. Actually, some of the families from our shelter went. And today, this is, 20 some years later, they still talk about that as like the coolest thing that they ever did was to go to DC. They took a bus on, and testified. They got tours of the White House and the Capitol. And, it was just like, it was the kind of thing that it really makes this a very grassroots effort. And it made the bill pass. And we're just, really proud to be a part of that.
Absolutely. I mean, it does take a village for sure. And homelessness will always be there. Unfortunately, it will. But people like you who have been through it or been in it since the beginning and has seen it evolve in so many, these amount of years, that must be pretty cool to see where it started and where it's at. And just to know that we still have a long way to go.
Yeah.
Long way. But we thank you, Diane, so much for your willingness to join us today for our podcast recording and, share the background of how came so involved and invested in the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act and your development in the Charlie book. I think if you do not have the Charlie book, you should definitely get it. 60 Ways to Help Homeless Kids. It's a comprehensive, practical guide to help your community homeless kids. You can always reach out to if you're listening and you'd like a Charlie book, you can always reach out to us in Region 3. We can definitely get that for you. But Diane and Amanda, thank you so much for joining us. And please stay tuned for next podcast recording on I Will Be Your Voice, a McKinney-Vento moment. Have a great day, everyone.
Great. Thanks for having me.